you. My name is Nathan Houter. I'm the Secretary General of IETM, international network of about 500 and more professional organizations in the contemporary performing arts from over 50 different countries. And we are extremely glad to be able to gather here with all of you, knowing that this is one of those rare opportunities and unfortunately one of those seldom, one of the few countries where such a representation of so many parts of this region and Europe can gather nowadays, knowing that there are less and less opportunities to come together. For me as a European, it's extremely precious to have the opportunity to get a deeper understanding of the issues we will talk about in today and the days to come, from a perspective that is partly, for some of us, new and also, unfortunately, very familiar. IETM is about meeting, it's about making new connections, it's about getting a deeper understanding, starting to collaborate, and hopefully influencing cultural policies all over the world. If we will succeed in that in the upcoming days, it's all thanks to three marvelous women, and I would like you to give them a warm hand. Julian Arab, Yumana Al-Jaziri, and Hassan Haidar. They will explain to you what was their intention to work so hard to have you all here.
Well, the intention is this. This was what we wanted, and it's very touching to see all of you here today. I'm going to answer those who are asking, where is the program? I'm going to tell you where it is. So, if you open the newspapers that are in your bags, and in the Daily Star, which has the English version of the program, if you open page 15,
So it's not for quantity, but it's page 15 also. And all page 15 from here is the one.
It's page 4 of the English newspaper. This is the full program of IETM. It was printed yesterday in 4 major newspapers who are partners with us on this event. And this is the first time that it happens. And we're very proud of it. And it's not only the program, there's a crossword puzzle that you see here, and there's 4 QR codes with surprises that took a lot of effort from a lot of people to make them happen. And we really hope that you have downloaded your QR reader, because you will need to access these QR codes. I'll just tell quickly the story behind this. So, we were told that in Libya during the 90s, at the borders, instead of asking for cigarettes or bribes or bakshish or... Why am I speaking in English by the way? ما بعرف. فبليبيا بالتسعينات معلش. I'm going to shift to Arabic. بليبيا بالتسعينات بدل ما يطلبوا على الحدود بخشيش وسيجارة أو حاجة
cigarettes or for any other thing they used to ask for newspapers. Therefore, this is the symbolism of this meeting, because we are meeting around the freedom of expression and access to information, and on how can we gather and access information at any time. I will give the floor to Hanan and to Jumana afterwards. Thank you. Since Jumana will be talking about feelings, I will be talking with objectivity and with subjectivity at the same time. In fact, simply, I feel that there's something very important for me, because I'm an artist. Before being a cultural actor since 1977 and until now, we are facing censorship. We as artists in cinema and in theater and literature, and we are paying for the state for censorship of our acts. And since the war and until now, we had an increase of censorship, and all the persons, religious figures, for instance, sheikhs, priests, political parties, employees, and different embassies, they make a phone call for the representatives and the employees in the civil security and the state security in order to ask for censorship. For once, I wanted to say that I am free, and we all know that we have the auto or the self-censorship, because we are only producing censorship and producing things that are in line with the convictions and the values that we have to abide by. In jogging, I took a clear stance, and I said I do not want to ask this civil security for permission, and because in this initiative I worked with activists, with lawmakers, and with thinkers, with programmers, and with many other persons, and this group that is working with us is very important. It encompasses all persons from different countries from Palestine. We have 2 persons from Palestine, and it was very difficult for them to come to Lebanon. So I think today that I'm really strong, and because of your support, I think, and before giving the floor to my colleague Jumana, I want to declare that today in the morning we were surprised by the censorship and by banning of 3 films in the BIFF Lebanon. 1 Palestinian movie, Affaires Personnelles, of Maya Al-Hajj, and another one for the Brothers Mollett, which is La Coupe du Monde, and for the World Cup, and the third one is from Mohsen Mahmal Baz. And I want to focus on the Mollett brothers. One political party said yes, they can run the movie, but we have some things that are banning and are condemning the Syrian regime in the movie, so they have to be banned. So I think that our presence is very important. Thank you for your presence, and you are most welcome in Lebanon. Good morning. It's very difficult to take the floor after Mrs. Hanan Hajjali. As she has said, I want to thank Julian, because I got to know Julian 2 years ago, and I want to mention the name of the person who made me familiar with Mr. Julian. This is Mr. Michel Guérin. We used to dream on Facebook and to have a gathering and a meeting, and I want to congratulate Julian for holding this meeting. Who's Michel? We'll tell you later on. Thank thank you for Mr. Nan, Victor, Hanan. Thank you for your presence, for the presence of all of you. 2 days ago, I was in Berlin to attend the Masahat al-Amal Spaces of Hope, and the organizers are here with us in Lebanon. The event was focusing on the Syrian artists in exile, and we had artists from all around the world. We talked about love. And today in the IETM Satellite meeting in Beirut, I came to attend this meeting with dreams, and I feel that I'm stronger. Of course, our presence today, our gathering is an act of resistance against depression, against difficulties, against censorship. We are gathered all together, and this is reconforting me, because to a certain extent we are still fine. You have to get to know we have to get to know each other during these 3 days. Thank you. I want to tell you that we will give the floor to Dr. Hassan Abbas, who will be the moderator of the opening session. Mr. Abbas is an academic and researcher, and once you will see him, you'll get to know him, you will know why we like him so much. In the opening session, we will call for Mr. Adel Saadani, Mrs. Basma Al-Husseini, Carol Aboud, Lina Khouri, Thomas Engel, and that's all, I guess. So we'll start the opening session in a while.
Ustad Hassan Dawood.
Mr. Hassan Dawood, Mr. Hassan Dawood. Allow me first to thank you for you. In the opening session, we will call for Mr. Adel Saadani, Mrs. Basma Al-Husseini, Carol Aboud, Lina Khouri, Thomas Engel, and that's all, I guess. So we'll start the opening session in a while.
Ustad Hassan Dawood.
Mr. Hassan Dawood, Mr. Hassan Dawood. Allow me first to thank you for your presence with us. I want to thank the organizers. I'm glad to be with you today. My function today is to intervene, not only to moderate the session. I have some remarks. The topic of today is a general topic related to the freedom of expression. I want to start with an event that has happened in 2003. Omar Amir Alai, the Syrian cinematographer, whose we've lost in 2011 before the starting of the revolution. In 2003, Omar has produced a movie and directed a movie in the late 2003, and I was the director of a cinema club in that time, and I invited Mr. Omar to present the movie, whose name is Tawafan in Bilad al-Ba'ath. And the film was banned in Syria and Damascus, in the cinema club, which I directed in a closed room. only the guests were allowed to enter. Mr. Omar, we ran the movie, and after the movie there were a debate, and one Syrian cinematographer said the following: as I was watching the movie, I was glad, but I got to know that I'm glad. So I felt frustrated, and this was Mrs. Amal Omran, and I was afraid because I was happy and I was glad. And then we can discover to what extent censorship can intervene in freedom of expression and freedom of thinking. Even if she is a human rights activist, she attracted censorship. So censorship, and now we can talk about auto-censorship or self-censorship. So even in a closed room, even if we only have guests inside the room, this person feels frustrated. So she had this inner fear in that time. This self-censorship is one of the kinds of censorship practiced by the authorities against creativity and arts. We have the pre-censorship and the post-censorship, or the prior censorship banned according to laws, and post-censorship, like today, the banning of some movies. And we also have the self-censorship. These kinds of censorship ban the three kinds of expression of freedom of expression, freedom of liberty, according to Article 19 of the Human Declaration of Human Rights, which is the freedom of thinking, then the freedom of expression of what we are thinking about, and then the freedom of information and spreading what we are expressing. And the authorities are banning these three kinds of freedoms. Today I'm glad with the presence of all of you, the activists and the cultural sector and the freedom of knowledge. I will be presenting Mr. Thomas Engel. Mr. Thomas Engel is the IETI president in Germany.
Just the secretary.
هو الأمين إذن, the secretary of the IETI in Germany. Mrs. Lina Khouri, Lebanese director, and we're talking about her. Afterwards we have Mr. Hassan Dawood, the writer, a famous writer from Lebanon, Mrs. Basma Al-Husseini, director of Action for Hope, and Mr. Adel Al-Sadani from Morocco. If you allow me, we will start alphabetically in the alphabetical order in order not to be expressing discrimination, because you all have the same value in terms of knowledge and importance. So let's start with Mr. Adel Al-Sadani. Since your name starts with an A, and we are starting following the alphabetical order. In this meeting, in this opening session, we will have 2 rounds of questions. The first question is: how do you articulate freedom of expression from a theoretical viewpoint? So how do you see freedom of expression? The second question is about your personal experience. So we'll have 2 rounds. Mr. Adel, since you are an activist, an institutional actor, you're trying to produce and to found institutions. You are going to the places where the normal organizations do not go to. What about the youth you are seeking and the marginalized persons you are trying to get in touch with? What about the freedom of expression? How do you see the freedom of expression? How do you think about the freedom of expression, and especially in terms of access to freedom of expression for the marginalized persons? Thank you. I will be addressing you in French, and there should be an interpretation into English. Yes, the French into English. Good morning. So the answer to the theoretical question is the following. I'm somehow frustrated while talking about freedom of expression because we are repeating the same things from time to time. We are in a group psychoanalytics from a psychological viewpoint and social psychology in terms of freedom of expression. Naturally speaking, when we go to some places, some rural places, persons express themselves freely. And finally, censorship and the relevant laws can be a generator for creation. So either we spend our life saying that in our countries there is no freedom of expression and we do not call for the freedom of expression with determination, or either we try to circumvent the censorship. I'm talking about Morocco, for instance. The censorship lines change vis-à-vis the society, the way of the society concerning the freedom of expression. So we have the emancipation of the individual since the early ages and until adulthood. It's how we can transform our public space into a space for freedom. How can we disagree without being in conflict? So this is the emancipation of the citizen. This is the construction of the citizen to a certain stage at which we can agree on some fundamentals in the public space in order to be able to interact, to talk one to the other without exceeding violence. We can say that in terms of comparison, in Morocco there is more freedom of expression if you compare it with other Arab countries. But we have 4 red lines. We have, and it's common to some Arab countries, which is sexuality, religion, and the Sahara, the territorial issue, and the monarchy. So these are the 4 themes or topics that are the red lines. The issue of religion and sexuality is a common issue in the Arab world. Maybe we can start with a certain work or act of social sciences. How can we, when a child asks his father the following question, does God exist? He'll not be slapped. This is an issue of psychology. As a starting point, we can act positively. There's censorship. We know that there's censorship, but the governors and the authorities want to hinder freedom of expression, and we can manipulate these lines with international relations. So, in brief, to summarize, so either we put ourselves in as victims and we enter this vicious circle, or we open up for creativity of the children, because we have no artistic education in our countries. So the creation starts from early ages. from the age of 3. And according to the references, we cannot discuss some issues. There are some taboos since the age of 3. That's why the role of the artist is very important. Why? Because we're not only transmitting values, but we are opening up the critical thinking of the child. There's another issue concerning the freedom of expression, which is the issue of censorship, self-censorship mainly. That's why we have to start by ourselves. There are some things that we do not dare to do because we think that we cannot do them, but collectively we can do these things. The Arab Spring and other terms are very important. Today, when they ban a certain movie, we still have internet, we still have the satellite. So those who want to limit the freedom of expression, there are some means and tools that we can manipulate in order to reduce the adverse effects on freedom of expression. In our country, we can still watch some movies at Arte or any other channels or YouTube simply. So there are some means in order to circumvent censorship. The first thing is to act personally, to try to transmit the idea of expressing ourselves and transmitting the idea of having a minimum trade union in order to be able to deal one with the other without having or resorting to violence. Thanks a lot. One of the some important issues that you have talked about is to work for creativity. Mrs. Hosseini, you are working for you are taking action for hope, for creativity. My question for you is the following, Mrs. Basma. To what extent can the donor be respectful of the freedom of creativity? The creativity or freedom isn't it reduced according to the policy of the donors?
Good morning. Thank you, Doctor. Maybe the answer is easy here, because my answer is for sure. It is sure that the freedom is affected by the policies of the donors, regardless if those donors are local, private, governmental, international, or foreign. Because money comes with its raison d'être. And these reasons sometimes are in line with the freedom and the will of the artist, but sometimes they limit this freedom and this will. I don't think that there is a great disagreement upon this question, but it is an opportunity for me to speak about my perspective regarding freedom, and maybe some of you will disagree with me over this perspective. Some think that the freedom is sacred and is abstract and absolute, but I don't agree with this. I believe that freedom of expression is relative, and it is, of course, subjected to social, political, and economic conditions and terms, and also it's subjected to the relationships of force and strength inside or within a certain society. So now, for example, in this square that is filled with arts, and here we're speaking about freedom, and we're only kilometers away from places where people cannot even breathe within the city of Beirut. So knowing this relativity is essential here. I'm not calling upon being subjected to restrictions on freedom of expression. I'm just saying that we shouldn't look at it as being fixed or permanent. So maybe I can give later on examples about how this freedom of expression concept can change So if we imagine that freedom of expression in Europe is something sacred in their life and it is protected by constitution and law, this is correct to a certain extent, but not in an absolute manner, because there are also restrictions on freedom of expression in Europe and in the US. And there is also something used here, because many people speak about denying the Holocaust, but I'm not saying that this is the example that I would like to give, but the space of negotiation about freedom of expression is essential within a society, and we should work on widening these spaces of negotiation. This is something essential. Yes, we need to do this, of course, with the donors, with the governments and all the other forces, because restricting freedom of expression comes from a certain place. There are restrictions by the donors, but there are also deeper restrictions that come from society itself, because society and the different communities within society practice the most severe restrictions on freedom of expression. In the past few years, we've seen a large wave of political change. Yes, it has started only in a few countries, but then it spread to other countries. But of course, the cost is very high, the price is very high, but we can capture the signals that give us some hope. Although we are seeing a lot of killings, a lot of people that are being displaced, a lot of poverty, but there is also a real change in recognizing the personal rights. And although these rights are very close to freedom of expression, they also affect freedom of expression. For example, they say the right of a person to follow their sexual orientation or the sexual orientation that they want. And here maybe I'm wrong, but general recognition of this right has increased, although it has taken a long time, of course. Also the right to using public spaces, of all of these rights are being recognized more and more. But the political and the legal framework has not yet followed the change that happened on the social level. I would like also to give a final observation. Of course, we all have different roles to play. We were able to widen the spaces of negotiation. This is what I like to call it, spaces of negotiation. And when we're artists, then I think that the duty of the artist is to push the limits, of course, without being in great danger. And the activists should work as a mediator to find the spaces of negotiation between the ultimate limits of freedom of expression and what we have in our society. So the activist, or the role of the activist or of the director, does not have to be in line with that of the artist. Sometimes we find directors of festivals or some publishers that are playing censorship only because they have to be mediators, cultural mediators. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Basma. Thank you very much. We're speaking about the relativity and freedom of expression, but now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Hassan, a great novelist, but he has an absolute attitude towards freedom of expression. He once said that censorship is a stick that is used in front of artists, and you said also that this nation, I don't know which nation you meant, if this nation does not put down the stick that is using in front of writers and artists, that then this nation will not know evolution at all. What I meant by the evolution and improvement of the nation, this is something that I said in general, and I can give you a few examples in this regard. When we were working in journalism, not only myself, the colleagues and myself, we were not afraid of the penal code regarding writers here in Lebanon. We were afraid of the other entities meaning the armed factions, the political parties, and sometimes the CSOs. This was our real source of fear. And I think that a number of assassinations that killed writers and journalists all along the past years, I don't think it was done by the Lebanese state against these people. So my feeling is that people in general think that if today there was a decision saying that anyone can say whatever they want, then I think that the obstacle will not be the law or the state that issued the law, but some factions and some people that we see every day, people that we meet every day, people that work with us maybe. I remember, for example, when I was discussing one thing with a friend of mine who has a different political viewpoint and is more religious than me. He said, since the beginning, please sir, there are limits. This is how he starts discussing with me. He said, this discussion should be within limits. When people use this word, within limits, or please there are limits, and we hear this every day, this means that you're forbidden from this, you're forbidden from that, you're banned from this, you're banned from that. Meaning that you need to respect religion or be under the umbrella of religion and do not trespass what is religion. And I have a friend that you often see on TV. She's a secular and she's also a professor, a university professor, and she thinks like all of us. So she was on TV with a religious man and it has become like a habit for her. So I told her, my friend, please don't go on TV with a religious man, because here there are a lot of taboos. Whenever you want to say something, he puts his hand like this, saying that this is a taboo, this is something that within the Sharia you shouldn't speak about. So then she has to take a step backward. So and then he takes her another step backward and a third step backward. So I think that such discussions since the beginning are sterile. So before becoming a nation, we need to become people who accept that taboos are not there when we are doing a certain discussion or when we need to give an opinion. We need to forget about them. So there are limits. Ms. Khouri, it is said that you have gone beyond the limits. They said that you broke them and you went beyond them, especially in Haki Niswan, in replay Haki Niswan. So you have spoken about something that wasn't discussed before, about people also that were not given the right to speak before. So can you give us what your perspective is about freedom of expression when it comes to women and taboos? Morning. Good morning from Beirut. Beirut that I love so much. Beirut, where you can find everything. You can see garbage, culture, beauty, ugliness. So 10 years ago I started with Haki Niswan, and my last play was Limada or Why, and I had 2 different experiences with censorship. Do you want me to speak about this or for later on? Okay, I'll speak about my experience later on. Maybe I'll repeat a little bit what was said before, but I'll do it in another way, because for me freedom of expression is a right, and it's related to the freedom of intellect. If I'm not free in my head and my intellect, then how will I have freedom of expression? But freedom of expression is related to my life, to my personal life, but also to my work in theater. So I cannot speak about something when I'm on theater as I can't speak about it with my father or with my neighbor, or because God says so. So what is freedom? What are limits? I don't find there are limits, but there is respect. And this is what we need to understand. If I am speaking my mind, this doesn't mean that I'm insulting someone, that I'm humiliating someone. And others should accept this and should accept me. So through my experience, I see that freedom in all eras, in all societies, freedom is related to the governor, to the ruler. And you have given examples about France, about the US, and all the other places where they have constitution that respects freedom of expression. But this is less dangerous than the other kind of freedom, that is freedom of the individual, and the other restrictions, the social and religious restrictions. And this is where the real danger lies. And I will tell you later on what happened with Limada play, because people went against me before the censorship. So to have freedom of expression and freedom of intellect, we need to build free people, free individuals. Yes, of course, we should think about changing the law because the law protects us, but it is easier to change and amend a law than change people, so that we can really discuss ideas and convince each other with ideas, instead of having people that don't even know what theater is, what real religion is, what real and how real politics should be. We need people who will accept this kind of dialogue and discussion. Many people are working on that, and people who are here with us today. And real change, real work should be through changing people, through having people speak freely their mind, accept the others, and know that speaking about ideas does not mean that you are humiliating them or mocking them. Because even if you propose an idea that is about religion, about religious principles or social principles, you are not humiliating them, you are just doubting something, and theater should be a space for dialogue and about a new language. So for me, freedom of expression should be given for granted and is something really natural that we should be living. But if we need this to happen on our society, we need to construct a new and free human being. And of course, this starts with us as artists. We need always to support each other in all the fields of arts, because it's not just one play that will change the mindset. We need a book, a lecture, a song, a play, etc. And our solidarity with each other, us supporting each other and continuing to speak about this idea all the time will be essential for this change. And I would like to end my intervention with what Voltaire said in 1700 something. I disagree with you, but I'm ready to die so that you can speak your mind. So this is something that a lot of us want, but we should be strong enough to assume this responsibility if we really do believe in it. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Khouri. You said something really substantial. We need to sit all together. We need to have a dialogue with each other. Mr. Thomas, your work is to bring people all together so that they can speak together, and you try to network between artists and between people who come from the theater from more than one state so that they can all speak together. Do you think that it is possible to sit all together and convey this knowledge to the other and to be introduced to each other and to have freedom of expression, while we don't have this freedom of mobility, this freedom of moving from one place to another? So can you speak a little bit about the relationship between the rules that ban people from moving and the importance of mobility so that people can meet each other and so that we can have freedom of expression?
Well, thank you.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you, IETM, for organizing this, to have these people together in that region. It's very exciting. Well, we try in the ITI to form a group of people to have an explicit political task, which is freedom of expression, artists' rights. And this was quite new because this organization I'm working for was always trying to avoid conflicts, to have this principle of national representation, and no member should be blamed for the policy of its country. This was to enable bridges and informal communication and cooperation beside the limits of the Cold War in the past and other conflicts between countries. But this very political task now comes together with the Convention for the Protection of the Cultural Diversity, and with the cultural diversity a lot of new items came in. It has to do with the freedom of expression, yes, the diversity of very different approaches to the public narratives, the freedom to defend these spaces, to negotiate it, and the mobility. And with the convention comes a definition of culture, which was important and is important for us. It says that cultural activities, services, whatever, have a double nature. It's cultural and economic. And I think the most danger now comes that all public goods are more and more taken over to the international economic competition. And since theater is one of the forms in the society which has a lot of public parts, so let's start with the education, which can be in many countries still public, to public supports, to theater groups, to venues, up to the distribution of goods with tax-reduced tickets and so on, which is still the case in many publics, but it's shrinking. And this is a development which limits the freedom of expression the same way like a political censorship. So this is twofold. And if we speak about censorship, we always have to consider that the economic censorship, which limits contacts with, forms a certain way of expression, even of censorship. If you go to Facebook, Facebook is censored by a private policy of a company, so it has nothing to do with any kind of even political instance which you can apply to. So it's just policy of a private company. And this goes more and more former public spaces like theater and other public goods. And so I think there is a very broad access needed to look for freedom of expression and the different attacks which are going to this very precious good. So we have experienced in Europe as well as in many other countries a radicalization of the public sphere, a right-wing policy which became more and more very public, which intervenes to the work of the theater people, of the intellectuals. And we have, on the other hand, if you go into mobility, a strict limitation as a result of the anti-terror fear, of the anti-terror laws, which makes it more and more difficult to have a cultural exchange between countries, especially when one country is a crisis or a transition country with several problems, so that even this exchange, which was much bigger in the past, is decreasing rapidly. So I think this is more or less the framework I want to speak about.
شكرا، وهو إطلاق جميل جدا ومهم. ويكمل ما قدموه الزملاء الآخرون في هذه الجلسة. طبعا كما لاحظتم عندنا كرسي فارغ وعندنا كرسيان فارغان هذا الصباح.
This morning, because Ms. Batkar couldn't be with us this morning, and also for Ms. Carol Aboud that also couldn't be with us today. So this gives us an opportunity to listen to your ideas, to see what you have to do, and this way our discussion will become even more important. But before giving you the floor, the speakers have given us the introduction, the theoretical introduction to all our work these 3 days. But now we will switch to the other aspect, that is the practical side of things. And here they will speak about the struggle to defend freedom of opinion and expression. And I will start with Mr. Adel. Mr. Adel, you like jazz a lot because this is freedom for you. And those who follow your life and your career know how much you love jazz. So please speak to us a little bit about your actions, your activity, and what you do for freedom of expression. And please speak a little bit about the institution that you run. So I'm speaking in French. Actually, it's very simple. I like jazz because it's related to what I do. It's some kind of spirituality. It's music where we play all together, we look at each other, and this is also a public space. And when there is a solo, the others wait for this person and put this person in the forefront. So this is education. This is the relationship that I'm speaking about, and we need also to follow a certain methodology when we do this. We need to know how we can work to have more freedom of expression in our countries. It's real simple, because freedom of expression should start at school. So I work with my government, with our money in our country, with our government, so that education in our nation, especially at the public level, can help our children know how to criticize, how to have a critical spirit. And this is something important. And also we need to see what our values are. There is modernity, there is tradition, and there are limits. And all of this is in the heads. There is also the freedom of expression aspect. We have also censorship. We have self-censorship. And there is also manipulation. There is also the other economic struggle, because we can, of course, see that our freedom of expression is transgressed by the economy, but it also happens on the judicial level, especially when the public space, whether it's virtual or physical, like journalism and newspapers, so there we find that it's limited. And we need also the legal aspect. We need to be really practical from our perspective, so that the activists, the cultural activists, can work together to reach freedom of expression. Because if we will only speak about it in a philosophical way, or if we take only one side of it, because this is a great work, because if we take only the social aspect or the judicial aspect, it's not enough. We need to work on all aspects. Education, artistic at school is also important. Educational, popular aspect, because in our country we have an inverse age pyramid, and we have many illiterates in our country, and it's been a long time that they haven't been in school, or they have never been at school. So they need to be in these public spaces, in the theater, so that we can start once again working on creativity with them. So we need to share this work among each other, because after all, here we're in this assembly and we're speaking with each other, and we all have kind of the same way of thinking, but our work is with those people who do not allow us to have this freedom of expression with the government, for example, and also the population that does not understand what the interest of freedom of expression is, or because they do not have self-confidence and they don't understand that through our work, through our art, we can have the necessary advocacy to have once again artistic education, popular education, so that people will be normal in their heads, will be serene in their heads. For in our nation, our countries, we still have the social limits, we still have the other kinds of limits, and we have these different restrictions in our head. I'm not speaking about artists, I'm speaking about the population, I'm speaking about the people. For the artists, they need to work, yes, they need to open people's heads, then they need to risk it. They need to risk things because they need to know how to make it possible, to make it possible for people to access this public space. What was done is that we have 3 levels of work. Now for the public sphere, of course we work on advocacy to change laws so that artists can access the public space more easily. For example, someone who has a guitar and wants to play a guitar in the public space, this is still a problem, and we're trying to change the laws so that they can do it, so that they can play guitar in a public space, for example. And we're also working to have artistic education, music, dance, etc., so that individuals are more emancipated. As an institution, we can do all of that. It should become a public service. It should be something done in the public schools so that we can build a new and a different society. The other part of our work is to work with the professional sphere and with the artists so that all together, as artists, we can have common demands, and then later on we can work on competition, because there are not a lot of donors, and I know that later on we'll be competing to gain the funding from these donors. So at least we need to be the example for others. We need to be the role models and have like a syndicate and say this is the minimum that should be defended, so we have freedom of expression. And then we have the public, the people. These are people that we serve with love. And we're doing all of this for our people because we need to speak to them, not put them in a situation of failure, because for us what is important culturally and also commercially is to gain the interest of people. So we need them to work with the young ones, with the older people, with the children, so that they can all understand what freedom of expression is, what is its importance is. Of course, there are ways to do it. Humor is also important for freedom of expression. Jokes can also be the way. We have, for example, the Forum Theatre that also creates some interaction between the public and the actors, and those who are elected as well. Also, dancing in public space is important. In our Muslim country, we know that dance can make people think about freedom of expression, meaning that we can have some freedom of expression without even speaking, only with using our body, with the way we dress, and also with choosing to which neighborhood we're going to. Like with jazz, as I said, it's a kind of spirituality. We have autumn, spring, etc. And then we can also work on improvisation and play with the others while we respect them all. Thank you. And I think that there is no activist in real culture that does not risk something. I know that all activists always take risks.
Zoker.
Joker. Mrs. Basma, you're also taking risks. You are shouldering a huge responsibility in your recent action. You shifted from institutionalization towards direct working with children. Action with hope. Can you talk about your personal experience in defending freedom of expression? Thank you. You've asked me to prepare a certain a story, but I didn't prepare anything. I will improvise. Our Action for Hope is 1 year and a half old, and we are working with groups of refugees. And outside groups of refugees, sometimes we are training them on arts and on creating a certain public space for arts and for culture through some cultural activities, cultural events, and some material part and an ongoing training. We think that these societies, these communities are coming from rural areas and are Bedouins, and they have not experienced vital and direct confrontation with the art. They haven't got in touch with any exhibition, with any theater play, with any movie. So, frankly speaking, we think that these societies or these communities are closed communities, and they are not confronted with the cultural arts and cultural offers and events. But surprisingly, this is not true, because these communities are embracing cultural activities and cultural events. I do not know how to express these things and how to interpret these things in light of the social and cultural censorship. These communities are facing marginalization because they are not enracinated in their roots, but still they are trying to embrace cultural activities. I think it is better to talk about another experience if I have time. I will talk about a certain experience in Egypt, and Ayman Helmi is a witness. Ayman Helmi is in this blue shirt is a witness. In April 2011, a group of the persons from different backgrounds and who are not partisans of any religious party or cultural party or political party. They come from different backgrounds. They tried to they gathered around the Al-Fan Midan and the Tahrir Square, the Abdin Square, which is a politically symbolic, and it's some steps away from Al-Tahrir Square. Once per month, we gathered in this square, and for 8 hours we played music, we played theatrical plays and visual activities, cultural activities, cultural events, activities for children. So this has become a platform for political stance, for cultural activities and social activities as well. We tackled some issues like racism and women issues and other issues as well. And this gathering, this organization was not very clear. It was anarchy. We had no office, we had no headquarters, we had no slogan. So it was sporadic. This gathering was sporadic. And these events and activities, and despite all the political and the security problems and obstacles, it became more famous, and sometimes we have, and sometimes in Abdin Square we had more than 20,000 persons gathered once per month, and it spread into other cities in Egypt in an anarchic way. And some persons from other provinces contacted us and told us that we want to have the same event, and so we said it's okay, but we have to use the same slogan and you have to hold the same kind of events. And this was spread through Facebook until we persisted in this way, and until July 2014, after the military coup. So in July 2014, we had a huge polarization between Islamists from one side and secularists from the other side, because they were not in harmony. They were in two different blocks. This was a problem, and because sometimes some persons used to say that we have two blocks, secularists and Islamists, but no, it's not true. In that week, in July 2014, Dr. Ahmad Harara, who is he used to criticize President Sisi. It was not personal, but he used to hold Sisi accountable for his actions. So we have some security harassment since 2011, but after this political speech, things have changed. So in August 2014, with the municipality of Cairo had to give us a certain license in order to hold our demonstration and our cultural events, but we were not granted this license in August, so the events and activities had to be postponed, and these events were banned totally afterwards. So this experience was very important for all of us, because we learned, we had to draw lessons from these activities and from these events. We used to know how to act, to deal, to discuss freedom of expression with other persons. In Abdin Square, some activities and some movies that were run, and some cultural activities and artistic activities were considered as really taboos and insightful, and a source of incitement as well. So this square became a platform in order to discuss all these things. I have some questions. So if this experience was transferred into an institutional way, was it better? But I really, frankly speaking, I do not have an answer to this question, but I wanted to share this experience with you in order to say that freedom of expression is in line with other kinds of freedoms, like personal freedoms and individual freedoms, and it's subject to bargaining with the political authorities. Thank you. Hassan, in your stories, you give voice to some persons who do not have voice. Ayam Zaida, or Additional Days, this story is very important and very famous. So do you think that in your story, you try to give voice to some persons who do not have voice? Please give us feedback concerning your personal experience. In fact, in some stories, the person who used to tell these stories, and I will give you some examples. In Ayam Zaida, as Mr. Hassan said, the speaker or the author is talking about his life. He is a 94 years old person. And another story, we have a woman who were distorted due to the war, and who is relating her story and her experience. So this story is not a recording act, it's a speaking act, as Mr. Hassan said. Yes, I used to give voice to those who do not have voice and who do not have access to the freedom of expression. Yes, I think that my desire to transform the author into some ordinary people, some people who do not have, whose voices are not heard, is like giving the chance to these persons or the opportunity to these persons to take the floor and to express themselves, but it's an attempt for me to try to put myself in place of these persons. Sometimes I was successful because when I when I wrote about this 94 years old person, I was 37 years old, and I gave him voice in the story. Some universities and some schools wanted to let their students read the story and discuss it with me personally, so I visited some of the universities and some schools, and in the beginning the students were surprised because I was not 94 years old as was mentioned in the story, and I was only 37. So let's go back to the story. While talking about the freedom of expression, so the story is a certain refuge for the person and for the writer, because if you want to be a journalist, for instance, in a certain newspaper, you have to get used and to get to know the political stance of the newspaper, who are the political parties and the religious parties, for instance, that are banned in the newspaper. And according to my own experience, this needs a science in itself. We do not only have a list we have to abide by, but sometimes this can change according to alliances of the newspaper with political parties and others and other parties. So things can change and alliances can change. We all know that in a country like Lebanon, and based on my own experience, the majority of us know that newspapers, so we have two opposing blocks from one part. We have some newspapers affiliated to March 8 and others affiliated to March 14. We have two different opposing stances, two opposing ideas, opposing ways of thinking. So, if I'm a journalist, I want to try to talk about this common phenomenon, the common Lebanese phenomenon years ago, because I do not deal with politics, but my articles are cultural or socially oriented. But I remember that in 1981, Zahle was bombed. Civilians were bombed in Zahle, and then I prepared a statement because the Syrian troops were present in Lebanon, and they bombed the civilians in Zahle. So I launched a statement back then, and I published this statement after having the statement signed by different persons. On the next day, the editor-in-chief came to me and said, "What did you do?" And I felt that I had to face problems, and the newspaper had to face problems. What's the solution? And he told him that you have to write an article to oppose Israel in order not to. But I told him, no, I do not want to appear as isolationist in the Lebanese and in the Lebanese news, in Lebanese newspapers and in Lebanese politics. This is very critical. And I told him, no, I cannot do this because I was not still deeply rooted in the media. media activities. And I told him, no, I cannot do this. Even though I had different articles, I wrote different articles on the suffering of the South, the persons in the South. I'm originally from the South, but to ask me to apologize for a statement I signed, so no, I refused that. And we became responsible. I was responsible of a certain part in the newspaper, and and overnight I lost my job at the newspaper, and I refused to change my mind. As Mr. Hassan said, the story is a certain échappatoire or a refuge. Censorship is present everywhere in different colors and different kinds and diverse things. Yes, Pasteur once said that when he used to talk about the microbiotics, he said that microbes are present everywhere around us. So the same goes for the censorship. And since we are dealing with some issues that are not related to current issues, this shows that this gives some room for maneuver and room for freedom. I am a journalist, and sometimes we have to take into account the different responsibilities, because this is a science per se. And whenever I used to write an article, and sometimes I received articles, and I had articles from other writers, because back then I was responsible, or I was in charge of some files. Sometimes we had problems in the articles, and I used to refer these kind of articles to other political figures who used to work in the same newspaper. So, in my viewpoint, we had all the persons working in the newspaper, they got used to these taboos and to the danger and the risks. And I always ask myself, let's say I have a person standing in front of me and saying that when the war is over, one soldier stands and says the war is over. If one day one person will come and say there is no more censorship, you are free, I started to think, what can I add to what I used to say? And I discovered that I cannot add many things, because I got used to writing in that way. I got used to the fact that the new freedom that I will be granted will be way for me, and I will not be able to use it in a sound way. It seems that we are facing the same problem. How are we gonna face freedom after these years and years of censorship? Nazir Khader said about you, Mrs. Khouri, that you have a certain desire, a bold desire. Yes, sometimes they say I'm bold in my experience. Yes, when I work in the theater, I work on issues that I embrace in the form and in the heart. So this is a certain échappatoire for me. I do not. I will start with the first experience and the last experience. Happiness one in 2006 and Limada or why in 2015. These two experiences were according to some kinds of censorship. The first one was censored by the General Secretary, and the second one was censored by the public. And Happiness one, I used to ask the Lebanese women, "What's your problem as a woman living in Lebanon? We have some social problems, vital problems, sexual-related problems, and others." And I had interviews with different women, and I didn't want to hide or to mask anything. I used a direct dialect and a direct stance and a direct language, because sometimes in my work I can manage to use the indirect ways, but in Happiness one I had to be direct. and it took 1 year and a half in order to get rid of the censorship from the security, general security. But 1 year and a half later, I became frustrated, and I tried, but without getting the approval for playing this play, I decided to run the play and to pursue my work, but I was threatened. I received some threatenings from the general security, and persons started to help me, and they told me, Lina, you have to talk to this person or to talk to other persons. 2 days before the opening, I met Mr. Tarametri. He was back then the Minister of Culture, and I told him, how can you help me in order to avoid imprisonment? He made some phone calls, and on the day of the opening of the play, I got the approval, and the play was run for 4 years. And the general security, because sometimes they only have 2 seats, they started calling me, we want more seats, we want 3, 4, 5 seats and more each night. And I got to know more persons, and they started to tell me, do you know why your play was censored? How do you deal with how do you talk about sex before marriage and other issues? And how do you talk about violence? How do you talk about rape? So I had to. Some issues were taboos. And one sentence was very important for me, because I had a list of the banned things and of the things that I was used, it was okay for me to do. It was easy to say Israel has invaded Beirut. It's easier to say that Israel has invaded Beirut instead of saying that a man has invaded your daughter. So this was really frustrating for me, and I was very glad that I was able to run the play in the end. As for the Limasa experience, that's why I used to say it's easier to talk with the authorities dealing with censorship, because I was I had a censorship from the people, from the audience in the Limasa play, and I had an experience of 10 years, a practical experience, and it was really surprising for me in Limasa, which is a social play, a social and political play. I will relate the story. The objectives or the themes of the play were the following. People are living in a coma. The events of this play were run in a nightclub. As they say in Lebanon, the Lebanese or the people are blind and deaf. We have so the masses are are in a coma. Aitham Mahfouz used to relay the story in 1971, but 41 years later, I wanted to run this play in order to deal with some issues, especially the garbage crisis. We are still facing the crisis since 2 years ago. So until now, I can say that we are in need of a free mind, and the politicians until then we always say that our state is corrupt. No, the people is corrupted, because the theatrical place or the theater is like a mirror of the society. So the struggle, we have individual struggles but not collective struggles. And I wanted to add to this idea related by Mr. Aitham Mahfouz in 1971. We have different persons in the nightclub, and they are relating the stories of these revolutionary. And I introduced Sami Clark's song in the 80s and produced by the church, entitled سيدي أعطنا من هذا الخبز دائما أبدا. And Ziad Rahbani was in charge of composing the music of this song. And it was not banned because it was not banned by the church back then. And in the end of the play, the persons start to dance, and in the end, they all die, but only the persons who were resisting were still living. So I try to integrate this gospel song because it's in pace, it's in line with the idea I wanted to present and to introduce. One journalist, one person who calls herself a journalist, she watched a 1 minute on YouTube from the theater on the play on YouTube. She wrote an article criticizing the theater play, and she used to criticize me and to say that this is illegal and this is unacceptable without taking into account the content and the framework in which this song was used. And it's really unacceptable because I criticized God, I criticized the Christ, and this was really frustrating for me. But it's really unacceptable because, and it's not true, because this one person who calls herself as a journalist used to criticize me, but I think that the audience is still blind. They refuse to hear things, to hear the reality, to hear the truth. That's why I tackled the issue of the importance of having a free mind, to having free individuals who are open and ready to hear other opinions. Thank you, Lina. Mr. Thomas, what about your personal experience in encouraging or defending the freedom of expression?
Well, I guess joining
في الواقع أعتقد أن الانضمام إلى
very quickly after we formed this committee in the ITI in 2012, Artist Rights Justice was formed under the umbrella of Culture in Europe, and Marianne was one of the driving forces behind it. And that was very important because it brought together more than 30 different activity groups, organizations and networks worldwide together, coming from very different sectors, from fine arts, from music, from theater as well, and exchanging information and making these cases public is very important to build up some public pressure on the political level and to support artists. This is one thing. The other thing is that, of course, there are tools developed which are now available and which help sometimes artists to just know what could be done and what is available. The other end is that this so-called invisible hand of the market can silence artists very more effective and smoother than a clear political pressure, which is the, let's say, old form. And these both together are forming a very repressive atmosphere and even changing on the long run the mindset of the audience. So if you are only in a buy-sell situation, you don't think about the cultural value. You are speaking about, you just say, do I buy it, do I like it or not? And there comes a different form of criticism, which is individual and not collective anymore. It's just like a comment on Google Play Store, so I hate this program, whatever. So this is something which is a situation we have to think about, and we need to address too, that culture is always a twofold structure. It's so artistic work. It's cultural and it's economic. And if it goes economic, so you have kind of censorship which is very much more effective, I would say, in the future than just clear political pressure. And the third thing is that, especially in Europe or in, let's say, safe countries, there is a big need for support. It's towards visa policy, for keeping up the exchange between really all different parts of the world. This is one thing. The next thing is to create networks and reaction schemes for artists which are really threatened or which need to exile. There are some networks which are aiming to single artists, which works quite good with journalists, with authors, playwrights, sometimes even with fine artists. Theater is a collective form, and to have an exiled theater group is something like a no-go. So you can just bring out single artists, but you have no residencies and no legal ways to exile a theater group. And this is something which is very important as well. And if it goes beyond the 3-month visa Schengen scheme, so it's all national policy. And this is why we are right now working in Germany to convince our politicians that these schemes for residences for artists need really to be redefined and to be opened for refugee artists.
لم يبقى عندنا وقت طويل يعني بدأنا متأخرين لكن كده ممكن ناخذ عدد المداخلات تفضل سيدي. معك
Good morning, Habib Idi from Tunisia. Actually, there are two important ideas, freedom and history, and arts and freedom. Arts actually can have an impact on freedom. When, for example, someone or an artist speaks about or writes about how to have tolerance for others, for al-Ma'ari, can they do it? Can they write one poem about God and say that this is the way to paradise? If someone writes this today, will they go to paradise? Why is art important in showing what the gains of freedom are? Because art remains, and the traces of art remain. And I am sure that the human beings were free, but then they created religions to limit their freedom. Bassam, please allow me to say that either freedom is absolute or there is no freedom. Yes, we need to have some kind of negotiations, but artists need to have absolute freedom. Today in Tunisia, we can think and philosophize if you want, and this is one of the highest stages of freedom. But when one started oppressing the others, then 1,000 persons wanted to oppress the artists, and this is wrong. And this is real censorship. And then censorship becomes public. But we need to have censorship so that we don't reach a civil wars. But how can we work in a way to gain more spaces that we had gained before? Thank you very much.
Good morning, my name is Ingen, I'm from the Netherlands.
Hello, I'd like to thank the organization for bringing such a diverse
speakers for their beautiful discussion. I have one remark and one question. First of all, I would like to applaud, I think, Jalila Barbar's plea for freedom, unrestricted freedom of speech. And second of all, I have a question for Mr. Thomas Engel. You said that you referred to the radicalization of the public sphere in the right wing, mainly in Europe. My question is actually, I would like to use this from a different perspective. I would like to say that there is maybe a radicalization of maybe political correctness, actually. I come from a country where an Islamic critic director was murdered by a Salafist, and ever since there was a tremendous repression of freedom of speech and people's urge to criticize certain fundamental beliefs or religions. And I would like to say maybe there is, ever since people have been sheltered within their radicalization of their identity politics, maybe, people have been saying people who criticize certain religions are called Islamophobes, while people who criticize, for example, LGBT rights or feminist theory are called misogynists. So I would like to, I see that as a bigger problem than, because it actually affects the freedom of speech, which are very fragile, the freedoms we have in Europe, which are very fragile. I feel like that is being affected even much more, and I would like to hear your thoughts about that. Do you see maybe some truth in that, or do you truly believe that maybe the right wing is causing a bigger problem than the freedom of speech? Thank you.
بدي اشكر عن جد المنظمات والمنظمين على المجهود اللي عملوه عشان نقدر نيجي اليوم احنا هون. الحقيقه انا بدي ابدا بنفسنا، يعني احنا العاملين واللاعبين في المؤسسات الفنيه والثقافيه
and the cultural and the artistic institutions. If we really have a reflection in our society, then it would be good. So are we able to build a certain intellect with people that we're working with, meaning that when we work with the youth and the children, on having a critical thinking, on analyzing, are we doing this? Do I need an artist that is able to beat his sister or his wife, or do I want an artist that does not believe in freedoms? Are we here to build a certain intellect, or are we just here to say that there is art? No, we need to work in line with our beliefs. To which extent are we able to be in harmony with ourselves when it comes to joining theory to practice? Because we work in the cultural field, and when there are different positions, or when we are in different positions, we still have the same ideas. For example, if I'm working in a donating entity and I want to give money to a certain artistic entity, do I just want to corner them, or do I want to put them in certain stereotypes? For example, it depends on where you are, and then I tell you, no, you need to be there so that you get the money. Even for the European institutions, they cannot commit maybe to the governmental policies. So to which extent are we able to go beyond these problems? Also for gatherings, it's not enough to stay working together here, meaning similar organizations. No, we need to open up to others that disagree with us, and not just people who agree on the same things. Thank you.
Thank you.
شكرا. أعتقد أن ما
I'm quoting you correctly that the freedom of speech or freedom of expression is not absolute, it's relative. And what is interesting is not how we're negotiating the spaces. I come from a country that has the longest liberal legislation allowing for freedom of speech. Sweden is celebrating this year 250 years of allowing the constitutional right of freedom of speech. Still, what's going on is exactly the same thing as is in many European countries. That is, with the rise of the religious minorities, with the rise especially of the right wing, what is going on right now is renegotiating the space where the freedom of expression is even seen as legitimate. We're on the level where many Arab countries are. And what is going on right now is kind of the rise of a new cultural wars, the way it's been done in the US during the late 80s, beginning of the 90s. So I think I still believe that the notion is what is in the West there is a very long time when Western values has been claimed to be universal. One of those values that has been claimed to be Western for some reason is the freedom of expression that has been claimed to be universal. But I believe Sweden is a proof that what is universal is the renegotiating and renegotiating the space where you're allowed to express yourself and allowed to express what. It's not the right itself that is universal. Thank you.
مرحبا. أنا الحقيقة حسيتني فكرة الحرية المطلقة أو لا تتزوج. ما بعرف.
Absolute or not is what provoked me. There shouldn't be a compromise when it comes to freedom, but the most important question is what are the limits of freedom? I think the limits are related to killing the others. As a Syrian, I realized that when we give people total freedom, what they get to when they push the limits is killing others. So for them, violence is also freedom. But art is the space where we can also express the ugliest wills in the human being without killing the other. And this is why I think we need to preserve this maximum space, because this is the alternative to killing others. Now, of course, I'm speaking about the extreme, but this is something that we find around us. And I think that today we need to distinguish between two sides of freedom. We have rebellion and we have freedom. What we're seeing today in the artistic field is that there is an authority over us that pushes us to rebellion so that we can really express our need to freedom, like what Lina said in her theater play. So we need to work for constructing the future generations. How can we work in a way that there will be no regression in freedom and without being only rebels? We need to build for a real freedom, for a stable freedom. And since we're here in an international forum, then I think that it's an opportunity for us not just to be limited to description, but also to think about our responsibility towards the future generations, so that they can have unlimited freedom. Helen Janabi. I'm Syrian, but I'm a resident of Sweden. I would like to speak about my experience when I lived under a dictatorship where everything was banned, everything was forbidden. I didn't have the right to prove my identity, then I went to live in a democracy, and my first right was my identity. Now this is not our cause here, this is not the question here. Maybe it's sexier to live under a dictatorship and express our opinions and our mind, instead of living where we have all the rights and do anything without having any censorship or any controller. So this is a luxury. So yes, it's great. So now as immigrants, as immigrant artists, now that we left Lebanon, Jordan and Syria, and when we went to have our IDs and we became residents in European countries, then they should communicate with the other artists that are still in Lebanon, in the Middle East, in Syria and Jordan, and create this channel of communication so that we will be able to achieve this freedom of expression. We should see how we can help the human organizations push these artists to voice their opinion. Sometimes we saw the others draw a caricature against God, and it was okay, even though they know that it might cost them their life. But this is their right, and we need to defend these people. We need to defend everyone's right in this regard. So this channel of communication between the artists that were able to achieve something abroad and those who are still under pressure, under dictatorship and under the risk of being killed. So I think that this is also a responsibility for us to help them and to be their voice. Thank you.
بعد في عنا 1 2 3 فقط لأنه ما 10 دقائق بس.
We still have only 10 minutes. أنا من إيران ومن
And also I think one way or another we are all aligned to European ideas of freedom. And it is actually funny and telling that nowadays there is more discussion of how to limit the expressions of pernicious freedom in Europe, and how in places such as Middle East there is still a desire for absolute freedom of expression. I think somewhat we have to go back to the roots of these ideas, which are European, and figure out under what condition and what context the bourgeois civilization has created these ideas. And for example, also looking at people such as Voltaire, a racist colonizer ideologue who has presented such ideas, that actually we people, not only in peripheral society, but also in Europe, need to rethink, because we live in a very dangerous world, and blindly following some ideas without knowing what is the root cause of those might just mislead us. Particularly in Middle East, I usually joke with my friends that I might not be Arab enough, but I can consider myself Middle Eastern. The formation of our modern societies is a colonial project, and our intellectual class, by and large, have been a sounding board for the bourgeois civilizations of the Europe with their own agenda. And I think it is an obligation for anyone who is really concerned with the conditions, this very precarious conditions, war surrounding all of us, to know what we are going to express once we actually have achieved the kind of freedom that we are looking for, and towards whose interests these expressions, this freedom, and these rights are going to be used for.
Okay, hi, Nabil Khan, Director of Stations. So first of all, welcome everyone here. It's a pleasure to have everyone. here at the station we show work that is visual arts, but also performing art. I just want to give them a couple of anecdotes just to kind of illustrate some of the things we have to deal with here in Lebanon. بعتذر ما بحكي بالعربي لأنه عربي مكسر عندي. I only moved back to Lebanon 3 years ago, so I grew up in Europe, in the States, in Africa, etc. So I bring a lot of baggage, and I would say maybe some of the non-compartmentalized thinking that you have here, euphemistic. We had an exhibition here a couple of years ago, curated by the Italian-Swiss artist from Sweden, from the Royal Institute of Art in Sweden. And among the artists we were showing, well, the objective of the show was to put in dialogue Swiss artistic movements and regional artistic movements. So we had some work with Swiss typography, and we wanted to show calligraphy. And one of the artists we were showing was a Moroccan artist, plasticien, plastician, Munir Fatmi. And the work is called Technologia. It's based on auto-relief by Marcel Duchamp, and part of the project is projecting sacred words from the Quran. So the curator turns up here, and we're setting up the show, and she says, "Okay, Munir, we're going to put in the corner over there, and we're going to project on the floor." I said, "My Arabic's not so good, but you're going to project words from the Quran on the floor. You know, we just kind of opened. You're going to cause me a little problem here." She said, no, this is the idea, and we have to do this. And I said, "Yeah, but you could take a plane, and if you did, I'd stay here." So she insisted. I spoke to the studio, Munir's studio. The work was shown in Toulouse, extra muros, so outside the museum space, and a few months before, actually like a year or two before, and a lady was walking over the bridge where it was projected, a veiled lady carrying her shopping in the evening, and she walked into this projection, and she got beaten up right there. So Munir had already had problems in a so-called free country with his work as a person was born Muslim. And so he took it out of the public space back into the museum and released a statement saying, you know, I fight for my ideas, but within art spaces. Okay, so I have that background. We do the vernissage, people stand around the thing, and some other people walked into it. And the next day, we wake up and I get a phone call. And there's a guy screaming on the phone, going, "Nabil Kanan, you have blasphemed my religion, we're going to cause you problems." I said, "Wait, what's the problem?" He said, "Yeah, you had people, you projected the words of the Quran on the floor, and people walked on them." I said, I projected the art piece of Munir Fatmi called Technologia on the floor, and said, "Yeah, but there's the words of the Quran, and I said, actually the concept of that piece is he wants you to step into the work and to bathe in the sacred light of the Prophet." And the guy said to me, "Really? We do things like this in Lebanon?" I said, "Yeah, here at the station, we there." And he said, "Okay, well. And so it went smoothly. Just to illustrate that it's not just a majority issue with one sectarian part of the region. A few months later, we organized a market here at the Design Market and Christmas. And instead of writing Christmas Market, we wrote Xmas Market. And the problem started on Facebook. People started writing to us saying, "You took the Christ out of Xmas, you put Christ back, you cannot write Xmas, you're insulting my religion, blah, blah, blah." And so we panicked about that, and I had to spend the whole day writing, saying, you know, this is a neutral space, and we welcome all creeds, colors, and cuisines. And people finally understood. So Two light examples to show that we can sometimes push the envelope here. Maybe as an alternative underground space we get away with a few things. But I agree with Adil, it starts at home probably, in the schools. What we do in spaces, in performances, in different artistic works, I think are very important, but in order to scale impact, we have to think about that, and I hope this is something we can also discuss over the coming days. Welcome, everyone.
أعتذر خلص الوقت رجعت بس الكلام يعني كان بالمداخلات في سؤالين موجهين واحد إلى توماس وواحد إلى أسماء. إذا تبدأ أستاذ توماس ثم دقيقتين أو دقيقة.
ممكن في البريك أنا وأنتي.
I can continue over the break if you want.
يعني
between the freedom of killing the others and freedom of expression, there is a close relationship. Because what do we call the hatred, the discourse, and what do we call this discourse? Enticing hatred, and what about the exclusion discourses? All of these are degrees of discourses that can lead to killing others. So, in one sense, we can say that we need to put a limit on freedom of expression so that it doesn't lead to killing others. So this is sometimes something necessary to do. And this is my viewpoint. This is why I say that freedom of expression cannot be abstract and absolute. But this doesn't mean that I am demanding to limit freedom of expression. No, I always demand artists and writers to go beyond the limits and break the limits to the maximum and in all contexts, but without this putting them at risk or putting others at risk, because preserving the human life is the most important thing, as you have said actually. But following the story that Nabil just told, I need to say that yes, mediation is essential. So how can we explain the value of freedom of expression to our society? How to make freedom of expression a value that is as important as the other values? People know that it's important to defend the freedom of the people who are in jail because of their political orientation, for example. So they need to give the freedom of expression the same value. But this needs a lot of mediation. As Adil said, it should be done through education and through direct work and direct activities with people. And I don't think that in history or in geography people were able to get to a certain point and say that freedom of expression was completed. So this is why I say it's not absolute. Please no, please no. Sorry, the comment was off microphone. سوف أحاول أن أكون موجزا. أعتقد أن حرية التعبير بالطبع هي ليست
very limited conditions of expression. But criticism is not a limitation of the freedom of expression, and it's very important to have it. And if criticism turns to censorship, then we have a certain point. And I think the debate and the negotiation about these different fields of criticism and censorship needs to be made on eye level between artists and audience. If it comes top-down or other way around, we are in a very imbalanced situation. And at the very end, I just want to quote one sentence from the Nordic Ministers of Culture from last May this year. Culture constitutes one process of and space for democratic debate. The freedom of artistic expression forms its backbone. And I think this is more or less summarizing what we should aim for.
زميلنا حسن جيدا.
Très très brièvement, en fait, on peut passer encore une fois du temps à traiter de la question philosophique.
We can, of course, speak about the philosophical and historic notion of freedom, where it started, where it ends, etc. But in our perspective, we dream of having a society where maybe we won't be living, but our children, and where they will have means of saying what they want without any restrictions. Maybe we have lost some of our turf, like what Hadi said. And here, if you remember Al Khayyam, Averwas, or the others, I can send you photos of our public spaces in Arab and or Muslim places, like in Afghanistan, in Kabul, and Algeria, for example, and where you can see that we have lost turf when it comes to freedom of expression. There has been a change in society. The debate will never end. This debate will never end. This is clear. But very simply, we need to be radicalized, but in a positive way. Meaning that freedom, yes, or freedom, no. When we have mildness, there is no freedom. When there is a problem with freedom of expression, when someone says something that they shouldn't have said, then we have the judiciary, we have the insults, and we have the procedures for that under the judiciary. This is, of course, if the judiciary was not corrupt. And so we have education, we have judiciary, justice. So for me, freedom of expression for me should be absolute. Then we have the negotiation issue, in which moment we move, etc. But what is not under freedom of expression is that when I feel that I was insulted, I can go in front of the judiciary and file a lawsuit against them. But I will not go and kill them. So it is through justice that we do this, maybe through a change of constitution. So I criticize philosophy and the notion of freedom, but how can we say altogether that we need this freedom of expression with our citizens and the public spaces? We will do this through education, through justice, etc. What we can do here together as professionals in culture and arts is that and that and that. But how can we work, each of us in their countries, to open up towards this critical thinking for our children and adults, and impose through our work, artistical or cultural work, an atmosphere that allows us to speak all together without war, without launching war. Thank you. Of course, it's a very long battle, and if you look at Arab history, maybe you'll find that before there was more freedom than today. This is a continuous battle. Before, this battle was very strong. Today it still is strong, or it's again strong, but with you and with our speakers here, we work for the victory of freedom of expression.